Hello, I am Danny Bahahar, the head of Lotus Cars. You may have heard a lot of speculation that Lotus Cars is for sale, so I wanted to come here now and give you the Danny Bahahar words that Lotus Cars is definitely not for sale.
Hello, I wish to buy Lotus Cars. I have many millions of pesos.
Is yours. Here are the keys. No, wait, you've got to jiggle that a little bit. You can't, no, don't put, yeah, that's it, you got it. Okay, no, wait, that always comes off. You're fine. Okay, thank you, goodbye. Weasel hats.
Hello, welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed. I'm Gareth, he's Richard.
Hello.
He's Zog.
Hello.
And this is one of those editions of Gareth Jones on Speed where we sort of conceptualise, right? Where we throw the whole show over to one idea and each of us brings something to the show. And I use the term conceptualise because this programme is all about concepts. I don't mean like, the concept of life, the concept of equality. I mean concept cars. Do you love concepts, Richard? I love concept cars.
Do you?
All concept cars, particularly the really bad ones.
Yes, I find them slightly annoying.
I love them.
Oh, they can be fantastic, though.
When I used to read books about space or aircraft and stuff as a kid, the first thing I flipped to was the back in the future. We will live on the moon and breathe our own milk. These visions of the future were the most entertaining. And concept cars, for me, are kind of like that. They are visions of the future, which will never happen.
They're the haute couture of the car world, aren't they? They're the really out there, crazy...
Haute couture, or as the French call it?
Come on.
I don't know. What does it translate?
Because I thought you were going to say it translates as a load of bollocks or something. But, unwearable fashions that aren't really going to end up on the high street, but they do reflect sort of thinking in fashion and design circles that does filter its way down to the high street.
There have been some stinkers. There have been some terrible concepts. I'm trying to think of what was the worst. Oh, there have been some awful...
there have been some really, truly horrible, ghastly concepts over the years. But there are also some that are remarkably close to finished production things. I remember the Mercedes SLK, for example, the concept that Mercedes came out with for that wasn't one of these insane concept cars. It was just a really great looking thing. You thought, I really want them to build that. And they did build it. Yeah. And it wasn't quite as fab as the very elegant concept, but it was pretty good.
The Boxer was a great example of that. That was a concept car which pretty much became... the car that we went out and bought.
No. Go and look at the original Boxster concept.
Oh,
it had a lovely snub nose. It had a shorter tail. The proportions were nicer.
They changed the front end
more like the sort of 550 Spider. They just couldn't package it the way it was. It also had the best interior vents I've ever seen. Little circular, I think, mesh holes, but behind each bit of mesh was a tiny little four-bladed fan that rotated.
Nice.
And it's that kind of detail, actually, often in the concept car can help to draw you into it, that gets lost. Similar with the SLK. The roll hoops on the SLK were a detail that were just much, much better executed on the concept. For very good reasons. I'm sure the Mercedes went a different way for the production car. But
can I show
money, usually. Also, concept cars are usually wider than they would be in production, even ones where they fully intend to do it in real life, because motor show halls are so massive that a normal sized car, particularly when it's sort of raised up on a turntable above all the other cars, can look a little bit weedy and lost. So they make them deliberately more butch than they can do in production.
And the seats
more impressive.
are always far, far thinner than they're ever going to be practical.
Yes.
Because they don't have to support someone's weight for more than 10 seconds.
Well,
so they don't have to be that comfy. And it makes the interior of the vehicle look far more spacious.
There are also
airy.
other reasons for that, because increasingly now side airbags are packaged in seats. Quite hard to get them into a thin seat.
Yeah.
And also, there's still a perception problem to overcome. The Range Rover Evoque, which is one of the rare examples of a car that made it to production pretty much unchanged.
Yeah.
They put a slot in under the main grille for extra cooling, and that's pretty much it. And the only other thing that changed fundamentally was the interior, because the concept had incredibly thin seats. One of the reasons they didn't do it for production is, I think, because people perceive those thin seats as looking a bit cheap and mean and not luxurious.
Rather
and they
than being racy and high-tech.
Yeah.
Can I show you something?
Please do.
Some pictures
It'll
of
work very
concepts.
well on radio.
What's that? I'm showing these guys a picture of a concept car. Do you recognise it?
It looks very Citroen-y to me.
It's a Bertoni concept, isn't it?
It is.
And I can't remember what it was called. It is Citroen-y, because you can see it's basically a Citroen BX.
That's right, yeah. It's a Citroen BX Coupe, except it isn't.
It's the Logan's Run concept car.
You're right, in that it's a Bertoni design that looks exactly like a Citroen BX. It was actually a Bertoni concept for Volvo. Did you know that? That was, I forget what it was called, not something like the Tuareg, but not Tuareg, I forget. But it is a BX Coupe, isn't it? A Citroen BX Coupe, but it was a Volvo, conceived as a Volvo. I love it when that happens. It's one of the reasons why I like concepts. Here's another one. Look at that. What's that concept? You recognise that beauty?
Corvette of some sort?
No.
I think I saw that in the Speed Racer film recently.
It looks like something from Speed Racer. What we're looking at is a wedge-shaped, two-seater, mid-engined, small Italian...
It's a Fiat.
Coupe, which had a...
Fiat X19?
Yes.
Or not?
It is a Fiat X19, although that was the Autobianchi A112 runabout. That was a concept that became the Fiat X19. It was actually originally an Autobianchi. Isn't that great? Another Bertoni design. I've gone Bertoni mad today, haven't I? And this one, I love to think about this. Do you recognise that, guys?
No.
The names on the boot.
Oh, wait.
I think if I could just look really
Ford?
close.
Yes.
Oh, that's that Capri concept.
That's right, the Vizos, the Capri concept from a good few years ago.
You know what?
Yeah.
That doesn't look too bad there, but I remember at the time thinking that was absolutely just the weakest concept I'd ever seen, because it was...
Whereas, you know, things like the
right
lights
there.
on there, and there are cars driving around right now that have rear ends or rear corners that look very much like that. So.
That car is driving around as the Volvo C30. Remember, Ford owned Volvo at that point. The work that they did in that, they pumped cheaply into the Volvo C30. Incredible. You part the two.
Now that you mention it...
Is this the same concept I'm thinking of?
Yeah, the Capri concept that Ford never turned into a Capri became the C30. It's an extraordinary story. Isn't that amazing?
Oh, look at that.
That was just a general few observations on some amazing concepts. I'm going to give you my favourite a bit later on. Should we play the guessing game? Can we guess what your concept is, Zog? Is it...
Go on, have a... Okay,
is it from Stuttgart?
No, it's not, actually.
Is it German?
I'm going to cheat a little bit. I've kind of got two.
Okay.
I've got one proper selection and just an honourable mention that I want to slip in there as well. But
well, which one do you want to do first?
Do the proper one, because it'll take too long otherwise.
Is it German?
No.
Oh.
Is it Japanese?
No.
Is it French?
No.
Oh.
Italian?
It is Italian.
Okay.
It's not a million miles away. We may have mentioned a company connected with this particular...
Ferrari?
No.
Lancia?
No.
Maserati?
Fiat?
No. I'd have thought...
Lamborghini?
No.
Maserati?
This may be a bit of a giveaway. If I was to say that this particular concept, there are actually three of them.
Okay, the Alfa Romeo Batwing cars.
There you go. Although we should say, not Batwing. They're the Bat cars.
The Bat cars,
or BAT for Berlinetta Aerodynamica Technica or something.
Thank you.
But there were these three wonderful futuristic sci-fi creations that Bertoni did for Alfa in the early 50s. I think there were three in subsequent years, 53, 54, 55. And I was lucky enough to see them in the flesh a few years ago. And
was this at the Science Museum when they had the Alpha display there?
No, it was at the Concours d'Elegance. I got some Super 8 film of them, actually. I must look out.
Lovely.
But you were talking earlier about looking in the back of the magazine for the articles about how we'll all be living on the moon and...
breathing our own milk.
There you go.
Yeah.
These three cars, the Bat cars... They're distinctly different designs. They're different interpretations of some kind of, futuristic Dan Dare Italian Jetsons car. But the Bat 3, Bat 5 and Bat 7, I think they were.
Do you have a favourite?
It's really hard to pick. I slightly prefer the last of the cars because it's a little bit more alpha than the others. The others are maybe just a little bit too far down the mad sci-fi flying saucer route. Whereas the last one, the Bat 9, I think, just got a bit more of the alpha in it, and it maybe just gets that balance right. So yeah, Bat cars, absolutely wonderful. But my honourable mention goes to the Ford Nucleon. Which,
remember?
From the 1950s with the nuclear reactor in the back.
There you go. There you go.
Didn't that become the Batmobile?
No, that was the Lincoln Futura.
Thank you.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Good. But yeah, I mean,
Good
a car with a nuclear reactor in the back. Why anyone ever thought that was a bad idea, who knows?
Why are we doing this?
Sadly, it didn't make production.
And who's this cheery fellow? It's Dad, pulling on on for the drive in his brand new nuclear-powered car, giving a happy wave with 3 of his 7 arms. But who's he waving to? Yes, it's son Johnny. Don't be fooled by the total baldness, he's actually just 9 years old. And he certainly seems impressed with Dad's new nuclear car. Just look at the smile on his faces, all 3 of them. Oops, there goes another tooth. Someone will be getting a shilling under their pillow tonight for that. Good job Dad saved plenty of money on petrol thanks to his nuclear-powered car. And he's saving money on trousers too, because one of his legs has just come off. Steady, Dad, you scaly-skinned madman. Nuclear-powered cars. Today's transport of the future, the day before tomorrow, today, now. Today.
Sniff Petrol with Gareth Jones on Speed!
You're listening to Gareth Jones on Speed Concept Cars Special. The great joy of this game, really, for us is it's that guessing game of trying to guess what each of us will choose in terms of concept cars. With you, it took me a while, Zog, but we got there.
Yeah.
Do you want to lead the way with Richard? Because I've got a theory. I bet he'll change it at the last minute just to make us wrong. You've got to stick to this now, Richard.
Scouts honour. Do you want me to write them down so I can't change my mind?
We're comfortable with the honour.
Were you ever a scout?
No, I was a Cub and then I got bored of it.
I did the same, actually.
Yeah.
Exactly after 6 weeks, yeah.
I gave up Cubs because the Cub meetings clash with the Wednesday night sci-fi movies on BBC.
Good. I gave up Cubs because we had to pledge to the Queen. I thought, why am I doing that?
Really?
Yeah.
I think I just gave up because I'm quite lazy and I'm not a joiner.
Go on,
So
can we guess?
what do we think? My first thought has got to be General Motors. Is it a General Motors concept, maybe?
No.
I think it's a BMC concept by an Italian.
Damn it!
Yeah?
Yes.
Am I right?
Is
it really?
It's really weird.
It's not the ADO 86 by Michelotti, is it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Was it by Michelotti, the ADO 86? I can't even remember what that was. They were all ADO something, weren't they?
Yeah, the production cars were, yeah.
I got that right!
But this is not what... That's really spooky. I wish I had changed my mind now so I wouldn't be so freaked out by... Although it's probably quite predictable.
Which one? It's in Gaydon, isn't it? You've seen it in Gaydon?
No, it's not in Gaydon.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where it is. There's actually 2 of them.
What is it?
And I think one of them has been destroyed, the other one is still extant, but I think it's in Italy. It's something called the Austin 1800 Aerodynamica by Pininfarina.
Oh, it's a Citroen...
Well, this is the thing.
Yeah.
This is, if you haven't seen it, go and look it up. 1800 Aerodynamica, it was a concept that was built by Pininfarina, who had done work for BMC in the 50s and 60s at the behest, indirectly, of the Duke of Edinburgh,
really?
Of all people. The Duke of Edinburgh was invited in the late 50s, I think, to go to Longbridge and have a look round, and he went to their design studio, and him being, presumably they thought, quite trustworthy, they let him into the styling studio and said, here are some of our forthcoming models. And the Duke of Edinburgh, being outspoken, said, I don't think much of those. They won't stack up very well compared to the foreign competition.
How fantastic!
And then they paid attention?
Yeah, well, they suddenly went, oh my God, the insane Greek has got a point. We better get a well-known design house in. Get me Pininfarina on the phone. And so they did, and Pininfarina did the Farina saloons, which were actually pretty generic. Pininfarina had this terrible habit over the years of continually doing the same design and then flogging it to other people.
Did it look like the Citroen GS? Am I remembering
the one I'm talking
right?
about did in a minute, but this is way before that.
Right.
This is in the late 50s when Pininfarina did some BMC road cars, and then they had a sort of relationship with BMC, so I think they sent them. Remember, the Austin 1800 was not a handsome car. It was very functional.
Fairly basic.
But not a pretty thing.
No.
Pininfarina said, would you mind sending us some mechanical parts, and we will confect for you what we believe to be a beautiful and modern car which you could sell. And they came up with this thing, which they called the 1800 Aerodynamica, because it was very slippery looking. Now, for various reasons, I think it would have been quite expensive to build, but also just because of that incredible corporate stupidity that BMC was so brilliant at. They turned it down, but it hadn't escaped the notice. Very futuristic.
Yeah.
And then, to prove their point that the design could be scaled down, they did a slightly less successful, but still very good-looking version of it based on the Austin 1100. Now, this, for me, is the one that's almost more galling, because this could have been the Allegro.
Right.
Because it was that
And we
size.
had the Allegro instead.
Instead, when it came to replacing the Austin 1100 and 1300, BMC said, no, we know best. They got Harris Mann, bless him, to do the Allegro, which originally, his first sketches looked fine, but then they managed to knacker it in various ways. Yeah. And, of course, it never sold as well as the 1100 because it didn't look as nice as the 1100, which was, in its day, a very pretty car.
Yeah.
If they'd gone with Pininfarina's designs...
Yeah.
Maybe the story could have been different. Maybe the whole story of the British motor industry could have been different.
Wow.
But in the meantime, an excellent designer called Robert Aupron in France had not been ignoring what Pininfarina were up to, and he basically and shamelessly and would admit to cribbing these Aerodynamica cars, the 1100 and the 1800 Aerodynamica, and making out of the basic design themes they had two of the best looking cars of the 70s, the Citroën CX and the Citroën GS.
That's right.
And they are uncannily similar.
They really are, yeah. I know the cars you're talking about.
Now, this undermines my argument that by making cars look like that, they would have been sales successes, because, of course, the GS and the CX really only sold very well in France and were always a bit left field for everywhere else. But I think BMC was sort of like accessible Citroën. Still very advanced engineering, clever suspension, hydroelastic, but not quite as mental as Citroëns, and therefore they could have sold a load of them around the world.
Great.
It's always the first rule of cars, which car manufacturers still get wrong to this day. If you make something that looks nice, it'll probably sell.
That's simple as that, isn't it? Cars sell on looks. We've said it on this show before, haven't we? Is it just too futuristic for fuddy old heritage-obsessed Britain?
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
And it would have been a bit more futuristic if they'd done it, when they were supposed to do it.
Yeah.
It would have.
Yeah, but then, they came along, and actually, the other car that owes some debt of gratitude to it with its fastback styling was the Rover SD1.
Yeah.
But these aerodynamic cars were in the late 60s, so they were way, way ahead of their time. So those are my favourite concepts, but they're also frustrating, because you think, actually, they weren't so bonkers concept-y, they were tangible.
They were doable concepts. They were,
and they could have changed the course of history.
Exactly. Concepts, a future which never actually happens.
Yes, there they are now, Britain's regent, King Charles III, and his new wife, the Queen Olivia Newton-John, preparing to drive off in the beautiful Morris 1800 Aerodynamica, designed by Sir Pininfarina. They're being seen off there by the former Prime Minister, Lord Noddy Helmer, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Cliff Richard. Surely the whole country, including the British dependencies of France and America, must be wondering where they will choose for the royal honeymoon. Will it be Llandudno in the independent Republic of Wales, or perhaps they will take the lunar shuttle to New Southend-on-Sea and our latest British colony, the Moon? And oh look, the happy couple are giving a shiny shilling to one of London's most famous street characters, the homeless pauper Bernie Ecclestone.
Gareth Jones on speed.
Okay, my turn now to suggest a car, my favourite concept car, but playing the game, you two get to guess.
So, go for it.
Okay. You see, my first thought is, okay, it's got to be a Welsh concept car. But as far as I know, Gilban weren't big
on concepts,
cars.
Unfortunately
so
not. It would have got
to go another direction.
It wasn't a Gilban, no.
Okay, it's going to be Italian.
It isn't Italian.
Okay.
Is it Japanese?
It's not Japanese.
Oh, damn it, because I had a car in mind.
Did you? What were you thinking? Come on.
Do you remember that gas turbine-powered Toyota coupe from the late 80s? I think it was called a GTV, oddly enough. Anyway, we digress.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, but gas turbine powered is smart, but
I thought... Oh, so in that case... Is it gas turbine-powered?
It's not gas turbine-powered, no. It's got I think a 1.6 turbo engine, certainly a 1.6 four-cylinder engine.
British car we're talking here? British concept car?
Yeah,
perhaps?
I think it probably is British. It's difficult to say.
A British car company that might be owned by, or was perhaps owned by somebody else, is that?
They're a multinational company who have manufactured in Britain and were certainly manufacturing in Britain at the time.
Ford?
Yep, of course.
It's a Ford concept.
The hot dog?
Hot dog?
Or is it? I'm going to have another go.
Don't remember the hot dog.
It was a little roadster.
No, don't remember it.
Is
not
it?
that. No.
Is it actually a pair of concept cars?
No, are you thinking of Zig and Zag?
I am thinking of Zig and Zag.
Zig and I forgot about Zig and
We're
Zag.
just going to run through Ford concepts now, aren't we? God, dear. Is it
the O21C?
Is the correct answer.
Did that have an engine then? I didn't,
Yes, it did.
Didn't know it had an engine. Oh, you've got a fact sheet.
I've got a fact sheet.
Had a
It was
good
designed
look
by-
at that in the design museum.
Mark
yes.
Newsom.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah, Australian
Mark Newson,
designer.
Australian designer of Greek descent, who did work for people like Smeg and Tefal and
Well, that was the
Indesit.
thing, wasn't it? He wasn't a car designer.
That's right, and he loved it.
But he's got a real interest in sort of technology.
Oh,
you know? I mean, he's designed a.
Let's describe it. Okay, it's different
light
to the way I
aircraft as well.
remember it. It's the Ford 021C. Why was it called that?
After
it's
a
a
Pantone
colour,
colour.
yeah,
There's
it's
a
a colour, isn't
Pantone.
it? Yes.
I think it's the orange of the original.
And the car for the 21st century. It was from the Tokyo show in 1999. The colour was Pantone orange. Do you remember that? It's a very distinctive orange, apparently.
I think that's not a million miles off the Sniff Petrol orange.
It isn't, is it? It's a good orange, that. Yeah, Mark Newson, built by Gear for Ford. The Tokyo Show 1999. It had the Z-Tech 1.6 engine, automatic. It was a funny little
LED
thing.
lights.
Yes, and interior lighting in the car. The whole roof lit up, and the seats swiveled through 90 degrees. The rear doors were suicide, and it had this curious boot arrangement, like a drawer. I mean, it was impractical, but a fascinating idea, a drawer that comes out, as well as a flipper patch. But do you know what it reminds me of looking at it?
It looks like a Trabant in that.
It does actually look like a Trabant, I will give you that, with that short boot.
But with oodles more style, you'd have to say.
Yeah.
Well, it was deliberately retro. They wanted to give it a retro feel. Do you remember the Simca 1000?
Oh, yeah.
Replacement for the Imp from the Roots group, as it was in those days. A little 3-box car.
Sorry, I'm going to have to say this because it's going to bother me if I
Go on,
don't.
man.
It wasn't a replacement for the Imp, because the Chrysler Sunbeam was a replacement for the Imp. I've got that off my chest.
Really? Is it really?
That show we did a couple of shows ago where we talked about things like Ackermann geometry.
Yes.
I meant to say, by the way, my mate Jobbo wrote to me and went, "You're slightly wrong there," and I now have lost his email. I can't remember what he said. But
We've had a lovely email as well.
and we were wrong about some other stuff. And
We're always wrong.
We're always wrong, aren't we?
That's great.
As we are never knowingly over-researched.
Yeah.
But when we know we're wrong, we like to correct ourselves and be pedantic about
we'll
it.
do
So,
in a
please,
couple of shows time,
carry on
just
being
do an
pedantic.
incorrectness roundup. We'll
do
atone
that.
for our sins throughout 2011.
I think it'll probably be an entire series in its own right if we correct ourselves. But
Anyway,
no, I
sorry,
think
I've got it off my chest now.
it was a replacement for the Imp in that it was rearranging and sold a few years later. Not a direct replacement.
A replacement rather than the replacement.
Listen, I drove around the country.
we can go with
It's
A
like saying my younger brother is a replacement for me. He's not. We can coexist.
We didn't want to put it in those terms, Richard, since you mentioned that. But
God, you sound like my dad now.
So the Ford 021C by Gear. Jay Mays was head of Ford design at the time.
Still is,
And
in fact.
Is he still?
Yeah.
Is he? And
He's
what
the overall, he's like the global design boss, and then Grumpy Martin Smith is the boss in Europe, and lovely Scottish Moray Callum is the boss in America.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that.
And
Murray
Jay
Callum
Mays
over there now.
oversees them. Yes, Moray Callum, who I met for the first time a few weeks ago, and he told me to off, which is brilliant. In a really nice way, though.
Well, that's
okay, I
nice.
was going to say, what have you done to merit that?
I met him and I went,
Is this
"Oh, that's really funny. I was just looking at one of your old designs the other day, the Lagonda Vignale. Which
Oh, I
could have
remember
been
that.
Another wonderful
Yeah,
concept.
great.
car. Big limo thing with a V12 engine.
Yep.
And he went, "Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, not anything I've done for Ford of North America in the last 10 years or anything like that. You're picking something from the 90s. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, no. All the Fords are great, I'm sure." And he was like, "No, the damage is done." We carried on talking, and I went, "Oh yeah, I like all those brilliant designs you did years ago when you were good." And he went, "Oh." Off. It was, I should point out, a very good-natured conversation. He's a good bloke. He's Ian Callum's brother, and Ian Callum's a good bloke. From a good bloke design dynasty, obviously. But yeah, That's my claim to fame. I was told,
Lovely.
Told if I got
F
that
off by Ford's director of design for the Americas.
That's practically a concept in its own right, being told off by someone at that level.
Do you go back to 021C as you're talking about the 50s inspiration for it? The thing is that what I think should have made it such a striking concept to me was the way that they fused that with a very, very sort of contemporary minimalist design approach.
Yeah, it was beautifully minimalist. That's why I liked it. It had rounded edges,
Beautiful,
space inside,
elegant.
a simple dash with one spoke for the steering wheel, very Citroën again.
In a way, some of those minimalist touches, some of the elegance of some of those things, I can't think of a single contemporary car that really embodies that in a complete way, but you get little touches of it in things like elements of the mini dash, maybe the way that there's sort of quite bold shapes and that kind of
I picked that car because it never actually happened, and I think it should have happened, and I think it would have done Ford good to have something that wasn't a hatchback and was a little city urban cool car. I like that vision of the future. It's a shame it didn't happen. I'm going to finish now on a couple of Ford concepts, because I love my Fords, and I love Ford concepts perhaps more than any other. Right, how about this, baby? Look, do you remember the Ford Iosis Max when it came out, which became the new C-Max, the current C-Max? When it came out as a concept, I thought, wow, fantastic, and it hasn't really changed that much to become the C-Max, but unfortunately, whilst the Iosis Max was gorgeous, the C-Max is just a pudding, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and see, this is the difference. We're looking at pictures of the two of them right now, and you say it hasn't changed that much. That's absolutely true in terms of the basic proportions, the broad strokes of it, but little details are what's changed, and those little details do make the difference between something being stunning and something being
I was going to say, I think it's changed in every single way. Never mind.
But those proportions are the same.
The proportions are there.
We'll finish on another Ford concept, right? Do you remember the Ford SAV when it came out and turned out to be the S-Max? Almost no change whatsoever.
All right, I'll give you that one. That's pretty much.
That is.
But a lot of time when they
but the concept's a lot longer.
I don't know whether it is actually. I think it's an illusion from the
dropped height. Lower
that's the stance of it as designers call it, because it dropped on its springs. That's the way the designer wants it to sit, and that's the way it sits. Once engineering have got the suspension tuned the way they want to. Name dropping again about my brushes with members of the Callum family, but Ian Callum designed the Ford Puma, and it's not very widely known, but when he was at TWR he did it as a job for Ford, and he designed the car. And then, while they were developing it to get the ride and handling the way they wanted it, they suddenly decided to jack the back end up a lot more and put much longer travel springs on it. And it totally changed the way that car sat. And I personally think the Puma looks quite sweet in its original form, but it does sort of stick its arse in the air.
It does.
And Callum, to this day, is furious about that, because that's not the way that car was supposed to look. And so he actually sort of quite likes it when Max Power Boys get their hands on it and drop it to the floor, because that's the way it was sort of meant to look.
First place.
But, it's hard to argue with the fact that it also drove beautifully and wouldn't have done if it had been slammed to the deck.
Ooh. I think we should go away and consider the Puma. I'm going to consider the racing Puma. Which one are you going to consider?
Well, I've driven the racing Puma and it was bloody awful, so it's just a terrible ride, one of the worst rides of any car, and horrible sort of heavy, sticky steering.
So which Puma are you going to
Just
consider?
a very, very early basic one.
Okay.
And I was going to say as well at the end of this programme, if you have picked up any errors that we've made, as usual, please do write in. But not you, Jobbo. You've had your say, and I know you don't like Pumas. Keep it to yourself.
Yes. And I'm off to consider the purry Puma, I think.
Oh, that's a nice one to consider. He was Zog.
Goodbye.
He was Richard.
Goodbye.
I was Gareth, and this was just a concept, really.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site, or follow us on Twitter, go to GarethJones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.
Gareth Jones on Speed!